Welcome to the Women of Rock Oral History Project podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 7, with my very special guest, Honeychild Coleman. She wears many hats and has been involved in many projects, mostly in and around the New York City area and in San Francisco. And she fronts one of my very favorite bands presently, and that is the 1865. This interview, like the others recently, was conducted over Zoom from our respective apartments. Definitely hope to see the 1865 and to meet Honeychild one day. I had a really great time doing this interview, and I hope you enjoy it. Perfect. All right, so I guess we'll just jump right in. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was born in another city called Russellville, which is more south, closer to the Tennessee border. And I pretty much spent all of my summers in that town until about age 16. And then from age 18 onward, I moved to New York.
Okay. So your time, what did your parents do? Did you have any siblings or?
Yeah, from this marriage with my parents, I have 3 younger brothers. And then my dad was married before, so I have an older brother and sister. And then I also have a cousin who my parents raised as basically kind of my 4th brother.
Okay. And what was your, like growing up, what was your relationship like with your parents and your siblings?
Pretty good. I mean, I'm like, how far back do I go in the backstory? I mean, I'm a kid of the 70s who grew up in the South and also in a blue city in a red state. But that state was 10 years behind on segregation, specifically with segregated schools. So that definitely affected my upbringing because every neighborhood that we lived in was either Black or white. And only once I got in 3rd grade did the school start to mix. So literally 10 years behind the rest of the country. Oh my goodness, busing. This is crazy. How radical. So yeah, that had an impact on a lot of things. I was always really tight with my brothers. We were like, maybe because we're all close in age, we were just like really, we had a friendship. And then we also had cousins who were the same set, like 3 boys and 1 girl, also close in age. So we were kind of like a little gang in a way. And also there's a lot of music in my family. Like everyone pretty much played music or did art. So I was pleasantly surprised once I started to get into school to realize like not all families were like that. I just assumed like, oh, that's what everyone does at home. They play instruments, and they make art, and that's just like normal. So
interesting. Yeah, that was my next question, was creativity encouraged in your household? And it sounds like it was. But so
yeah, it wasn't really elevated as anything special per se. My dad was a musician. I found out later he was a drummer when he was young. But during my childhood, he was managing bands. And one of the bands that he managed was my cousin Doug Miller's band. They were kind of a show band, which I don't know if you know much about the history of show bands in the South, but the biggest show band to break out of the South would be Midnight Star. Like they were big in the 80s. But my cousin's band, to me, was more like Earth, Wind, and Fire style with costumes and really dramatic and also really good songwriting, really great performers. And so I grew up around that. Like I grew up around my dad, like bringing equipment in the house and being excited on the weekend because the band was going out of town to like a gig or a barbecue and like helping him make posters and just kind of, again, all those things seem very normal. Like I didn't think that other families didn't do those things. But my dad really wanted us to be like the Jackson 5, I think. So at a certain point, he did bring some instruments home. Like he, and because we were in public school, we just had, regular bands. So my one of my brothers, Al, played trumpet. My brother Don played bass, but he really was playing drums, like he had drum pads. And then I played clarinet because I didn't want to play flute and trumpet was already taken. But I really, really wanted to play guitar, but I was just too shy. So when my brothers got guitars and amps, I would just be like, well, do you mind if I just go in your room and play while you're out playing baseball? And they never cared. So I was like secretly trying to play guitar the whole time.
Oh, wow. And wait, how old were you, like around when you started playing guitar?
I started probably around 12, 13.
Okay. And did
but
you
I never talked about it.
No, it was like a secret.
It was super secret. Like I would just like, there was no cell phones or anything. So like if one of my brothers or my cousin was about to run out and, be out playing with their friends, I'd be like, hey, when are you coming back? Do you care if I play your guitar? And they're like, oh, sure, whatever, who cares? So then I would just go in their room and play.
And so were you like completely self-taught on the guitar? Did you ever have music lessons, like clarinet lessons or any other instrument?
I had clarinet lessons for 1 year in 5th grade. And then by middle school, I played clarinet at home probably for another couple of years, but I didn't really want to study it in school. I didn't want to be in band because I was more leaning toward rock, and I just felt like, that was fun. But then I could read music, and now I cannot. So I don't know, something happened between that didn't translate to when I started learning guitar. Because I didn't have books when I was learning. I was completely like learning songs off the radio, and for years just playing by ear. I tried to take a classic guitar class at junior college when I was out west. And I was bored because I didn't want to play nylon strings. I didn't want to have the discipline to stick it out. I think I went like maybe a month.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started, I played saxophone, like,
oh, nice.
8 till I can still play a little bit, but I can't read music anymore. And I'm like, I couldn't read when I was playing, and then everything else I just taught myself, like you, like guitar, drums, and everything. But I cannot read any music. It means nothing to me. So.
Yeah, I used to be able to follow charts like sight read when I first, because I took chorus also, and we had to do that, because you always have music books. If I knew the starting note, I could follow. I don't even have that anymore. So it's one of those things, you're just like, oh, vacation, I'm going to break out the piano book. But then I just end up jamming on the piano and I never break out the book. So,
so you said that you were shy. Was that how you would like define yourself as a kid, like middle school, high school? Were you always shy? Who were you?
Up until it was a weird thing because I was definitely one of those kind of nerdy overachiever kids. Like school was where my life happened. It's where I like had straight A's, and I had a little circle of friends because there weren't a lot of girls in my neighborhood that I could hang out with, but my best friends were at school. Mm-hmm. And then I also was a visual artist. So at a certain point in taking art classes, I want to say in like 4th grade, I started to win some awards. And then one of the awards I won was taking classes on the weekend. So I got to go to this special school on Saturdays. And then in high school, same thing, like my middle school art teacher taught those special classes. So I always had this kind of extra visual art thing happening. And that's the arena where I felt the most normal or the most unshy and just the most myself. But in regular school, like I couldn't relate. I didn't like sports. I wasn't popular. I was poor. Like I had all the things going against me that make you feel like, oh, I'm just kind of like hide in the corner. But then like I got exposed to punk and new wave, and that really helped me feel like, oh, this is something I can relate to. And then I slowly found those friends. I was still pretty awkward, but in my group of friends, I felt good. Yeah. So.
And how did you, like, who initially exposed you to punk and new wave?
I was a avid radio listener to the point that I would stay up late and find weird stations and weird shows. So my first exposure was this show that was on Tuesday nights, I think, called Rock Over London. And they would play like the top chart of whatever is happening in the UK. So then I would write those groups down or just remember, and I would go looking for the records. And maybe because Louisville's a big university city, our public library system was amazing. So we always had really good vinyl that you could check out. So a lot of the records I would learn about, I would find at the library or at the bookmobile. So that was like my first exposure. Then, like the 80s happened, MTV, all the different charting shows. But I had a friend who was older, this woman, Pam Miller, who I talk about her a lot because I don't think she understands the influence she had on my life. But my junior year of high school, or maybe I was even a sophomore because I feel like she was a senior when I was a freshman. She had spent a summer in New York and she came back. And my friend Janet, who was like my art friend, who I did like all my new wave stuff with, she's like, okay, Pam's back from New York. We're having a meeting at her house. You got to be there. So I go to her house. We're like three Southern girls drinking iced tea on a hot summer day. She sits us down. She goes, okay, look. And she cut her hair and she came back with Fiorucci New Wave boots. And she brought back the Smiths, Tones on Tail, Nina Hagen. Like she brought back so much music and just played tape by tape by tape, explaining all her journeys. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to New York. Like literally just like, I felt like everything I want in my life is happening there. Mm-hmm. And there's a community to support this music. We're not just like the oddball kids, in the back of the record bin in the mall. Like it's normal there. So that was the biggest exposure. From then on, we just looked for everything, read every book we could find, and then just plotted our way.
I'm sorry, I have everything's like written, so I'm like jumping.
Oh, sure, no worries.
So you were like a sophomore in high school, maybe a junior, discovered all these bands. Did you intended to go to New York? Is that why? Did you also intend to like go to college? Was that something that you felt like you had to do, or did you just want to move to New York and do music?
Oh yeah, I wanted to go to college, definitely. And I knew I wanted to go to art school, and I had applied to, I think, Art Institute Chicago. I forget the name of the big art school in Atlanta. There was another big one in Ohio. I knew I did not want to go to a regular university because I felt like I wanted to be in a freer environment and just focus on art. Because I'd spent my whole academic career focused on getting all the elective things tight. Like I studied French and I was ahead in history. Like I really worked really hard. So I was like, if I'm going to be an artist, I want to go to art school. And like a fool, I was such a dreamer. When I look back, I'm like, I can't believe I applied to one art school in New York. I didn't know about FIT. I didn't know about SVA. I only knew about Parsons.
Yeah.
And my plan was, if I don't get in Parsons, I have a cousin in Long Island. I'll stay with her and I'll just work my way to the city. Mm-hmm. Like that was my whole plan. Never been north of Ohio in my life. Never had a real job. Like literally, I was just like, that's my plan. I'm going to get there. Eventually, I'll be in New York. And thankfully, I got accepted. But I literally waited all summer for that acceptance letter. It came, I want to say, a month before I was supposed to be here. So I was definitely kind of like, not quite sure which way life's going to go, but I just know I'm going to New York. I'll just make it happen.
Yeah. And, well, this might be a weird question, but I'm always wondering as like another poor person about like money, like the financial aspect.
Oh, no.
How did you like, did you have scholarship or how did you?
I had scholarships. I had grants. I, again, was in denial about, what cost of living is in life in general, let alone in New York. So I only went 1 year because of that. But yeah, and I also did work study and I had like a part-time job also. So yeah, if not for scholarships, if not for my grades, there's no way it would have happened. I literally I spent a year working on my portfolio to get ready. I was so determined. So it definitely, being like already the awards I'd won from grade school up probably helped also. Mm-hmm. But I tried every angle. I was like, I'm president of French club. I'm in Beta club. I've got this. I've got that. Like I did everything but sports, basically.
Yeah. So you stayed for a year. I mean, was that like disappointment that you had to drop out? I mean, what did you do? Like, did you?
Well, I didn't know because again, like I can laugh about this now, but it's kind of painful. Because I was just so excited to be in the world, I wasn't paying attention to some details. I didn't know I wasn't going back until the beginning of the next year. So I basically just kind of lived life to the fullest. Like I went out probably way too much because my dorm was literally in the hub of every nightclub you can imagine.
Okay.
And they were all free. And also the drinking age was 19 and I didn't drink, but I could go to any club at age 19. So it was just like I went from, oh, I don't know how to drive and I'm stuck at home to, oh, I can go anywhere. Like literally, there was no time to mentally prepare for that much freedom and that much lack of structure.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed that I couldn't go back, but I also knew I felt like, well, this is my home, so I live here now. So it was this weird thing of like, well, maybe because I'd gotten here on my own, no one could make me leave also, which was like very liberating. Like my parents can say, well, you have to come home because we're paying. Like they weren't paying. I was literally on my own. So that was interesting.
And when did you start like playing music? Or because it seems like visual art was your focus initially?
Yeah. My original intention was actually to be a fashion designer because I'd also been making clothes since I was like 10. So I was also a little frustrated my first year at Parsons, although I loved all the fine arts. It was similar to my guitar experience. I was like, I'm already making clothes. I'm already designing. Why don't I get to take any fashion classes my first year? Like literally, once I got there and saw that was a deal, I was kind of like, oh, I really wish I would have brought my sewing machine with me because I'm in New York and I have access to all this stuff now. So I it's so random that I started playing music and it happened through fashion because I ended up moving to Berkeley, California with my ex-boyfriend and then I stayed because I loved it and I just needed a break. I wanted to not be in the city and I could afford to go back to school there because college was so cheap. And I started singing because two of my coworkers were singers. And you know, when you work in retail, you're singing all day. You're like playing music that you like. We had a record player under the counter. Literally all day long, we would just be doing like triple harmonies while we're steaming like vintage clothes. So I started to think about it seriously after one of the women I worked with, her name was Tambourine, very California. She's like, I'm having a birthday party and I rented a recording studio. Would you and our other friend Lisa Bell want to come and sing with me? And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So then I went to her house and she knew how to engineer. She had like a 4-track recorder in her house. I didn't even know dudes that had the amount of gear she had. Like she was really professional. And we rehearsed music that she wrote. Like I was just like blown away by everything. And then we went to the studio and we did it. And I was like, oh, maybe I want to like do this. And then people started asking us to be backup singers in different bands, but we were also protest singers. Like we would do a cappella things at like anti-Gulf War protests or like ACT UP protests. Like that's how we really started performing. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up singing in a disco cover band, which was like, okay, we were a disco cover band at the height of grunge. So imagine our reception. Like it was a slow reception, but we did like frat parties and college things. And once I started doing that and feeling like, even though I was still kind of shy on stage with the band, I didn't feel shy. That's when I started thinking like, okay, maybe I want to try to do this. So I started to try to take classes. Like I took a voice class. That's when I tried to take guitar. And voice was the thing I stuck out with. But the thing about voice classes, because I was still shy, I realized like, this is great. I love this teacher. This is really interesting. And then the class was so big that you would have to wait your turn to do your recital in front of everyone in the auditorium. So like a few weeks would go by. And then when it was my turn, I would just not go back. I would just drop out. Like, I can't sing in the daylight in a big classroom full of people, like, but I can be on stage, but this is too much. So I probably took that class 3 times without waiting without ever doing my like recital. And then the fourth time I tried to take voice, I at this point I'd actually been performing more, so I had a little more confidence. And I also had this amazing, amazing teacher. Her name's Jackie Hairston, who I later found out was big in like West African dance. Who knows? But she gave us these meditative tools to build up our confidence. So that's the only time I took a voice class where I stuck it out for the whole semester and was able to like do things and do the exercises and perform and critique and everything. So it really changed. That's when I felt like, okay, I'm really going to do this now.
All right. Oh, and just going back to, you said when you were doing like a cappella protest songs, you know, has your music or like music performance always had, or have you always been like a political person? Because it kind of sounds like that's how your music even started. If you started out like singing
right
protest songs.
I think it's it wasn't necessarily something premeditated. It just seemed really natural. And maybe also the environment. Well, one, like my parents were pretty politically active. So being aware of politics was something I grew up with, like sitting down on Sunday and reading the paper and knowing things, and also having protests and just experiencing the different tensions that we had growing up. Then moving to Oakland, which, you know, the Black Panther Party started there. There's all kinds of activism all the time. It felt like an honor to be invited because I felt like, well, this is something I grew up doing. This is cool. But on the flip side, we were also, you know, playing these very decadent parties and doing other things too. It seemed like the common theme was unity, if I really, really think about it. Because even when I got into raving, because that was another music outlet, like I was working with DJs, the rave attitude on the West Coast then had a hippie vibe to it. So even though people didn't specifically talk about politics, there was this kind of all-encompassing, welcoming vibe of like, everyone can be here and everyone can do this. So I guess you're right. You know, like in the beginning, it wasn't like, I'm going to do political music only, but those were the environments where I felt really comfortable and safe. And that's where I was getting invited.
Yeah. And you're just like your career is so interesting too, because you can't, you know, I don't feel like you can really be categorized as like this type of musician or this type of musician because you DJ. I had no idea about like rave. I didn't know that you had anything to do with like a rave scene in California. I was like, okay, you know, I initially knew who you were because of the 1865, and I just saw you as like a rock musician. And then the more research I, you know, you're playing in disco bands, and so
yeah, it's kind of all over the place.
yeah, wow. But I guess, well, this is kind of weird, but how would you like categorize yourself or your music today, if that's even possible?
I can't categorize my music because I like too many different styles. And people often say, how can you be in 6 bands or 6 projects? But because I have a lot of different interests, I feel like each one serves a purpose. And sometimes when you're only in one project, especially if it's a band and it's a democratic situation where everyone has to like what everyone's doing, like there's no leader or whatever the case be, like I've never really, I feel like if I'm in a band with people, I don't want it to be, I tell everybody what to do. Like, I don't want to be the boss of the band. I want to be a member. So, but sometimes in those cases, you might have an idea and be really excited, but the rest of the band might not like it.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, most people will be like, womp womp, okay. And not everyone can be solo or do it on their own. And not everyone has time or maybe even it's not comfortable for everyone to do more than one project. Like not everyone can multitask that way, but I don't know why I can. It's just very natural for me. And of course, if they were all touring and gigging at the same time, it's impossible. But thankfully, that's not the case. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can't imagine just doing one thing, but I also can't imagine it's freedom. It's total freedom. Like if I bring a song to the 1865 and no one's feeling it, it doesn't bother me because I'm still going to do the song. I just have to find where it fits.
Yeah.
And it's not even an ego thing. Like, I can't believe you don't like my music, or I can't believe this. Like, oh, okay, whatever. There's plenty of time to write with whoever you have that chemistry with. But to force something because it's a style and there's an agenda, like, I don't really feel good as an artist doing that. I can't fake it. That's probably why I can't do commercial music either. Like, like sometimes the relatives will be like, why don't you be a studio person? Why don't you do this? Like, well, first of all, I don't read music. Second, I don't have that kind of voice. Third, I'm a creator, and that takes away from my art time if I'm always looking to work on music that maybe isn't my heart.
Yeah.
But I've been in situations where I've been a player in a band and loved it. Like Apollo Heights and the Slits are shining examples.
Yep.
I didn't write music with either of them. Loved playing. It was awesome.
I'll ask that. I don't want to get off track. Just everything you says makes me think of something else. Well, actually, I am going to ask this first. So I am jumping ahead, but we'll go back. So you like identifying more as a creator and just being able to kind of wear all these hats and do whatever you want. Do you think that it's made it difficult for you to like make a living? Do you think that it would be easier if you were just like one person who did one thing, played one type of music, had one project? Is that even something that you've ever thought about, like music or art as a career?
Maybe, my partner asked me that recently, and maybe I haven't found one thing that I would want to put everything into and it would be enough. I don't know. I think it just is too boring to me to just do one thing. Now, it could be a situation where, like, I'll use the 1865 as an example because it's the first time I've worked with a major label. We could become so busy that everything else is on pause. And that's fine. And everyone that I work with understands that because everyone has lives. It would be really hard if I were in another band that didn't understand, because I would be sad to lose them, But at the end of the day, yes, I'm an artist who's working hard and I have to make a living and I have to prioritize for myself. And it's not an easy thing to verbalize. I think I've seen it happen with some friends I know that were in bands that blew up, and then the people that felt left behind were really bitter.
Yeah.
When I feel like when that happens, it's great because one, you're happy for your friend's success, and two, it shines on the community. So it's a good thing, and it gives them freedom to come back and do whatever they want. So that's kind of how I approach everything that I do. But I can't imagine, maybe because when I first came back to New York from California, after I took that one class that I was able to finish, a lot of labels approached me, and I'd never had a band at that point. I'd always been solo, with like a hollow body electric guitar and drum machine. Like, I'd never even played with a drummer in my life. So I felt like, this is cool, but do they understand what I'm trying to do? And none of them did. And it really scared me, because then I felt like, okay, what if I sign with someone and I'm locked into their idea of what I should be doing? So I'd rather not. And it's kind of a crazy thing to say, but I just had such a bad feeling. And later, some of those people tried to work with people that I knew, and I saw that it never went anywhere. So I was like, that would have been me. I would have been stuck in this bad contract with that production company, and my music would have been shelved, which is worse than me just doing it myself. So
were these like independent labels or major labels?
One label was medium major. I don't want to say who they are, but they mainly worked with hip hop. Yeah. They mainly worked with hip hop artists, right? Okay. And I knew the hip hop artists they worked with. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting that they're looking at me. And they're like, oh, and we got this rock band. And then I saw the rock band and I was like, oh no, This is what they're promoting. My career is doomed.
Yeah.
And then, but I still like kept talking to them and having meetings and doing auditions. But I was just like, oh no, they don't know what to do with me at all. Like that can't be the only option out there. So.
And this was
I
when
just
you
kinda
moved
held
back,
out.
back to New York?
This is right when I moved back because I was just playing in the subway. Like I didn't even when I came back to New York in 93, at this point, like I didn't know any other musicians at all. All my friends were like fashion and visual arts people and photographers. So I was like, well, maybe if I play the subway, you know, I'll make some dollars and I'll meet people. And I did. Like people gave me their info. One of my friends, Will, I started recording with right away. Like I definitely made some lifelong friends, but the people from the industry that approached me were like, I was so creeped out. I was telling my dad this last week. I was like, you know, before the internet, I would just go to the library once a week and read about copyright laws and stuff because I had no one to advise me. I was like, I don't know what to do. How do you talk to a manager? Like I was just in there reading all the time. So yeah, I just got this feeling of like, you want to manage me, but you're not asking me anything. You don't know what my creative vision is. And then your taste in rock frightens me. So no. In so many words, I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
So
maybe after the interview, you can. I'm really curious what the band was, but I don't want to.
Yeah, I'll tell you. You'll laugh, definitely. Okay. You'll be like,
what? So, what was your first band?
If I don't count the disco band.
Yeah, if you don't
my
count,
first
like,
band, yeah, it was just Honeychild. I wasn't even using my last name at that point. And then the members were from this other band called Bandroids.
Okay.
They basically kind of became my backing band, or two of the Bandroids members, the drummer and the guitarist, Molly Young and Muck Washington. And then we got Micah Gow, learned to play bass so he could join the band. So that was pretty awesome.
Okay.
So it's the first time.
I can edit this in, but you like your mic kind of broke out, I think, when you were saying an original member. So if you just
the original members, sure.
If you just want to like repeat that and I can put it in.
Oh yeah. So my first band was just called Honeychild, and the members were two members from the Bandroids, Monk Washington and Damali Young, and then saxophonist Micah Gow, who also plays samples with Apollo Heights, learned to play bass, and he joined us.
Okay, perfect. I know I'd feel bad. You know, you always want to give.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're at the mercy of Zoom. And I was like, let me make sure I turn off every Bluetooth thing in my studio because it interferes sometimes. So.
Oh, yeah. And I live in a kind of a rural area in Western Mass. So I was just hoping that it wasn't going to rain today or no hurricane remnants because my Wi-Fi is like so terrible. But I think so far, so good.
Good.
Yeah. And I did want to ask you, so we're talking about like 93, 94 now around that period.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm obviously very interested in, you joined the Black Rock Coalition, which has been around since 85. I'm not sure when you got involved with that, but then you also started Sistagrrrl riots. And of course, everybody knows about Riot Grrrl. But I wonder if you could talk about, you know, forming Sistagrrrl Riot. Why? How did you form it? With whom? And
sure. Before I formed my first band, I had made friends with all of these sister girls individually. The first person I met was Simi Stone. And Simi was the roommate of this guy, Rich Salmon. And I met Rich when I was busking in the subway. So I was busking in Soho at the Broadway Lafayette station, and Rich worked in Soho. So I treated busking like a 9-to-5 job, and I did it Monday through Friday, rush hour. And if I was doing temp work, I brought my guitar with me and I did it right after my job. So I was really like every day I made flyers because I was like, I want to meet people, I want to find gigs. So Rich was the first person I met, and we started doing open mics together. And then I went to his house to jam one day, and Simi heard us and came downstairs with her violin and just jumped in and started playing. So we hung out a lot. then later I met Tamar Colley, and I met her because she was in the food co-op with my roommate, Adam, and came over for dinner one day. And me and my roommate Karen were just like, watching movies, trying to stay out of the way because they were having like their dinner thing. And she walked in and we're like, wow, she's really cool. Who is she? And then while he was cooking, she came and hung out with us on the couch. And then we just became friends after that. And at one point, I don't even know like if I was gigging so much then doing rock, because at that point I was already doing stuff with DJs. But she's like, you know what? There's this musician I want you to meet. Why don't you come with? There's two women I want you to meet. One is Maya, and one is she didn't tell me Simi's name. Yeah. So she takes me to Brownies, and I walk in, and Simi's on stage with Akeen, who I also know from the electronic world. I was like, oh, I know her. Mm-hmm. And then so this is the day that I meet Maya Glick, who is Mother Goddess, and the four of us in the room, we just kind of looked at each other. And then I think tomorrow's like, yeah, let's have coffee next week. We got to talk about this. So we meet at this really cool place called Biblios, where I used to do a lot of acoustic shows. And she's like, there's Riot Grrrl, and nobody's talking for us. And we just need to make the Sistagrrrls. Mm-hmm. And let's do a show. And we're like, yeah, it's a great idea. And this is around like holiday time, maybe like November. Yeah. And we're just like brainstorming. We're like, let's do it on Valentine's Day. Let's do it. Like we found the venue, whatever. And I was like, okay, I guess I got to put a band together. And at this point I'd done like one jam session with Damali, the drummer, but I'd never played with another guitarist in my life, never played with a bass player, nothing. And I knew Monk because I also met Monk when I was busking in the subway. The one time that I played a show at Grand Central, he walked up to me and I'm like, who is this awesome grunge looking like black punk kid? This is amazing. And like we both just kind of froze, and I was like, I think I'm done for the day. And he's like, would you like to have tea? And I'm like, yes, I would. So I put my guitar in the case and we left and talked about music for hours, and then we started writing songs together. So I called up Monk after the meeting about the Sistagrrrls. We put together a band. Tamara put her band together because she had been in Song of Seven. I don't know if you know, in the hardcore scene.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
When she was in Song of Seven, yeah. I never got to see them play because I was in California during that time, but everybody knew about them. And actually, Damali, my drummer, was the drummer of Song of Seven. Oh. So she put her band together. Simi had a band. Maya had a band. We threw the first Riot the following Valentine's Day. And then we did like maybe 5 more after that. But it was the first time that any of us ever played for a predominantly Black audience. So it was really emotional. It was very overwhelming. And we didn't think about, I wish we would have documented more. Like I know someone has video out there. I know a couple of people took photos. Yeah. I wish we would have done more recordings off the board. Absolutely. Because we were all just like on the brink of something. But at no point was there any conversation about trying to link up to the actual Riot Grrrls. Like, I feel like once we did that first show, we were our own thing. And then the buzz just started growing. And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Did you guys hear from anyone from like the Riot Grrrl movement? No.
Not till now. Now I see certain people in that movement talking about us, but no one's reached out. It's really interesting.
And before, so you all had that meeting and you decided to do this. Were the problems that you noted about the Riot Grrrl movement, did that come from firsthand experience? Like, had you gone to Riot Grrrl meetings or shows or anything, or was it just from like reading zines?
I just remember like different people telling me, oh, there's this thing called Riot Grrrl, you should look at this, you should look at that. And then I'd be like, whoa, is it just all white? Like, I don't see anyone. Yeah. Like, and I didn't even realize, like, only later did I realize, like, oh, there was like East Coast presence, because in my mind it was all happening out west. Right. But Yeah, there's no, like, I have one friend, my friend Ramdasha actually had a zine that I found out about later when Vice did the article on us. But she was like another Black punk that I met in the electronic world. Because again, like that's like a whole other conversation. But like we were the alternative Black people in that scene. But I had, and then I was like, oh, you're from out west. Oh, you play drums. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, cool, here's this other sister who's into electronic music and punk. How random is that? So we all had different things going on. Like Maya's the reason I started DJing because she was the first, she was one of the only downtown rock DJs. Like this is way before like I'm spacing on this guy's name now. Like later in the aughts, it became cool to have rock DJs, but she was doing it like in the early 90s. And then she was also playing just a lot of music that people don't think of as rock. And she had this whole, I want to say manifesto about how funk is racist because funk is a label for Black rock when we all know it's just rock. So why call it funk? Like she was schooling people at every DJ session. So I just saw her and got so inspired. And I thought, well, I could DJ maybe. Like I want to play rock and roll. I want to play punk records. Like I don't want to play her style, but I want to learn. So there, everyone kind of had like different things going on outside of the riots, and it was really cool. And also our styles were all different, and that was okay. And there was no policing of, well, you have to do this. You have to play this way. And like the first time I ever played at CBGB's, it was just me and a drummer, and they let us because it was the riot because we produced the show. Whereas normally it probably wouldn't happen.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you mentioned like playing CBGB with just a drummer and how that was kind of possible because you guys were doing your own thing. What was the rest of the scene like in New York at the time? And how did your music or other people who were in the kind of like that coalition, how did their music fit into the sort of overall New York scene at the time?
Sure. I actually was not a member of the Black Rock Coalition at that point. Okay. And I had access to some bigger venues like the Cooler or trying to remember what was around because so many have closed. Well, the Cooler was the main venue where I was able to book us on a bigger stage because of the work I'd done there with the electronic scene. And then the other main venue that we played a lot was Meow Mix, which was all women run and really the only feminist club. And we had complete freedom there, and it was amazing. And then Brownies was pretty open, but it was always a little tricky. I feel like maybe they changed management a lot. It didn't feel as consistent, even though we loved that venue. I feel like we each brought a different type of venue to play, and we would do breakout shows together. Maybe it wouldn't be a full-on riot, but like two of us would be on the bill, like at Fez, which is like Undertime Cafe, or what was the other venue? Well, Arlene's Grocery, we played a lot, which also has hands down one of the best sound systems in New York. So understated. But one of the things I did hear from some promoters was they were a little anti-BRC. And maybe part of it was like they didn't, maybe they just weren't into rock or they couldn't relate to the general vibe of most of the BRC bands. And they were older than us and just, like kind of all in the glory of Living Color, who I love and adore. And they're like our sonic big brothers. But BRC had, to me, when I think of what the BRC does, like they work in different venues as well, not just rock, but they really advocate for the artists. So if you have an organization that's making you pay people and come correct, that could be a little uncomfortable when you're used to kind of getting over on people being naive. Yeah. So I slowly learned that was the case when I started booking shows. When you get out of that phase of I'm so happy to play, just like, wait a minute, we only got drink tickets, like you start to really look at like what's happening logistically. And I also felt I didn't know if the BRC was right for me because I felt like I was too new and they were so established and maybe I was too weird. Like I didn't see a place there. That happened for me later. Like I think I didn't join until 2005.
Oh, okay.
I went to a lot of shows. I knew people. We were all in the same scene, but I didn't really understand like how the membership worked as an artist until later.
Mhm.
But they definitely were a huge influence on, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to New York and make music and be on that path and meet people in that world. As far as CBGBs goes, I have nothing bad to say because again, the staff was super cool. The sound was always great. The sound people were always nice. And it was just being able to play in such a place with that legacy was pretty incredible. Like, and it didn't really change much. You could look at a video from 79 versus when we were there, and it was exactly the same feeling, probably smelled the same.
Same
Like, yeah, the energy never changed. And it's funny, like at first I was like, oh my God, that John Bravado store is where CBGB's was, and it's so weird. And I think I went to like one of the first parties they had there where they had a band playing.
Yeah.
And they tried to scrub away the dirt of CBGB's. They can't.
Oh,
They
good.
can't get every corner. Like you see this beautiful black matte wall or whatever, and then you look and you're like, oh, I can see a little rust behind it. Like you can just see a little edge of what the club was. And I don't know what happened in the reconstruction, but if you've ever been there, there's still an essence of the smell left. It's never going to go
Great.
away. It's like the ghost of CBGB's is still in that building. It's so bizarre, but it is weird at the same time. But yeah, my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's very depressing to me when I drive.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, and so I also wanted to talk about labels and just your experience, with independent labels versus major label. Like Mass Appeal is that considered major? I don't even know anymore. I'm like,
Yeah, it is now because of their connection with Sony and Def Jam.
Def Jam. Okay.
And that was pretty much kind of happening when we got signed. Mass Appeal, I feel, really took a chance with us. We're kind of, I don't want to say an experiment, but definitely not the usual kind of group they would book. But they also had Run the Jewels, who are my friends, who are very rock tinged. They liked our message and they gave us a chance. And otherwise, we've had total freedom, which I'm still pinching myself. Like we could kind of do what we want. Like we had a wonderful team of creative people helping us put together the album. It feels like a small label the way they run it. And it's it's been a pleasure, honestly. Every label I've ever worked with has been different, even if they're small and independent. One label I worked with was so strict, I couldn't believe it because it was literally just my friend. Like right down to telling me how to make music videos, like you can do this, you can't do that. And I'm like, aren't we like artists? So it was really shocking. And then I look at a label like Invisible Grrrl, which I don't know if you know much about Julia Adamson. She wrote me on, was it Facebook? Or was this still the MySpace days? It might have been MySpace.
Oh, wow.
And it was MySpace. And I know because it was right after the Slits tour. After the Slits tour, I'd given some music that was not released. I don't even think it was mastered, to be honest, to this woman, Fiona Ledgard, who had a community radio show. Just like, oh, here's a track I made, whatever, if you want to play it. And she started playing the song. And then Julia heard it. And she wrote me and said, hey, I heard your music on Fiona's show. I don't know if you are with a label, but I have a label I run. It's mainly women, and I really feel like you would be a good fit. You may have heard of some of the music I worked on. I used to be in this band called The Fall, and I'm like, what? I'm like, wait a minute, rewind. Did I read this correctly? Anyway, let me know if you're interested. And I was just like, yes, hello. So she is a really interesting person. I know she's working on some things, but I really hope she writes a book because her life is super interesting, and to me, I'm just in awe. And I know like she's also an artist. She's doing everything herself, complete DIY. I just wanted to say yes for the prestige of working with her. And that's the attitude I took to it. And again, total creative freedom, really supportive, really like I've done 2 like kind of mini UK tours, and she helped me with so many things. From even like making my CDs, like literally like true DIY spirit. And I would gladly make another record with her just because she was a pleasure to work with, and it's awesome. And that's really the only 2 times I personally was signed to a label. Otherwise, Apollo Heights got signed to Manimal Vinyl, and that was also really amazing. Paul's awesome to work with. We got great press. We toured a little bit on the West Coast, very well received. It's interesting to see what every label wants to do with you as an artist, and also what their dream might be. For some labels, I feel like they're a fan and they just want other people to hear your music, and that's enough. So otherwise, other situations where I have music that's released, I was a guest on other people's records. I cringe as I say this, but I never saw those contracts, so I don't know what was promised. But again, you know, I was new and beginning and excited, and we're all friends and whatever, and no regrets. But I can't tell you anything about the label experience because I never dealt directly with those labels. With the exception of Asphodel, because I did get to meet Not a Human, and I got to go to his studio in San Francisco, and that was amazing. But I didn't deal with any administrative paperwork with them directly. I was literally a guest with the Wii records with DJ Olive and Loop. So
have you ever had do you do all of this yourself, or have you ever had like a manager who does things for you? Or
I briefly had a manager, bless her soul, my friend Rhea, who she originally used to manage Apollo Heights. And then at one point when I was getting ready to do my first solo release, and I was also trying to start DJing like more ambitiously, I reached out to her and said, hey, would you be interested in working with me just to help me get organized? And she's like, oh, I'd love to. And it was great. I feel like she really helped me understand when you think about what a manager does, like she's heavy administrative, she's heavy licensing, she's heavy into legal things. And I literally knew nothing about those things except what I learned at the library. So she kept me on track, like, oh yeah, you need to look at this, you need to do this, you need to do that. But having a manager, you still have to do the work. They're basically just guiding you. And I think there's this fantasy when people think, I'm going to be a rock star and I'm going to have a manager and accountant. No, you still have to check in. You still have to look at everything. No one's going to do it for you. They're here to guide you. So that was my only experience. I would love to have someone again someday. I feel like that day might be coming soon. I hope. But yeah, that we worked together for about a year, I want to say, like right when my first solo album launched.
This is a really boring question, but people always thank me for asking it. How do you make money as a creative person or a working musician? I know a lot of it's touring. I know you don't really make money like selling records anymore. So what do you do?
Well, I have 2 versions because of, sadly, the pandemic. So the pre-pandemic version was, I was actually DJing a lot. I was a resident DJ at this place called Artisan Fleas, and they're like a community feeling open market for makers. But there are also people doing like vintage clothes, there are people making food, whatever. So they have in New York 3 locations, one in my neighborhood in Williamsburg, one in the Chelsea Market, one in Soho. So I was DJing at least 3 days a week there. I also became a resident at Beauty Bar, which was awesome. That was like a dream come true because I just love them. I feel like it's a time capsule in New York, and I hope it never changes. And then I had just started DJing at another place called Clem's. So between that, sometimes getting asked to DJ between bands. Um, Oddly, selling music on Bandcamp a little.
Oh,
Um, when we do have shows, selling merch, and thankfully, because of my design background, I design a lot of merch. And then, I mean, it's so weird. Like my last year before the pandemic, I was freelancing for the first time, like full time, because I never wanted to be a freelancer because it wasn't stable enough. But I was like, oh, well, this seems pretty easy. So I was freelancing for a location company, which sounds vague, but it's such a New York or an LA thing. Like people book locations for shoots or for parties. So that was my day job.
mm,
Before that, I worked at a nightclub for almost 6 years. I started off doing ticketing and door stuff. And then I eventually worked in the office, which I love because I'm a paper geek. So
oh yeah, right.
um, that's pretty much been my work for like almost the last 7 to 8ish years. I've done corporate jobs as well. But near the end, I was really kind of starting to make at least half my music from music or my money from music, which was really exciting. Like, and I don't think about it when it's happening, but right before the shutdown, I did once a year, I like to sit down and do a what does it cost to be me list? What can I curb? What would I like to spend money on? Because before the pandemic, we had a studio we paid monthly rent to, all those things. So um, when I did that chart in February of last year, I realized like, oh wow, most of my money is coming from music, from gigs and DJing. Like this is kind of impressive because it doesn't feel so hectic.
Mm.
So I think when things open up again, that might be the case. I'm freelancing now, working for a nonprofit part-time here and there. And I'm just living kind of a frugal life.
Yeah.
Like literally just I buy records, I buy guitars, I stay home. Like this is kind of it. But because I have this experience in nightlife, I can freelance in that world as well. Like if someone has an event, I know everyone, it's easy, I can do it. So it's one of the things that makes it hard to think about living someplace that's not New York, because there are random ways to make decent chunks of cash here seasonally that I've not witnessed in any other city.
Yeah.
If I did have to work and it's not music, like those are things that I can do and I do well and I have seasoned years in. I also kind of can't imagine working in an actual office again since the pandemic mentally, even though I don't necessarily like having my home as my office.
Yeah.
The amount of time that I save not commuting and not doing all those extra things that you have to do just to be in that conservative world, it's hours off your life.
Yeah.
So I can't visualize myself going back.
Mm.
So I'm just constantly thinking of other ways to
Yeah,
have
and
money
in New York,
coming in.
it's expensive just to get from one place to another. Like,
I mean, you think like, oh, I'm just going to meet someone for coffee,
yeah.
$25 later, like, oh, I'm going to buy lunch, $25 later.
Yeah. So,
I saw a meme yesterday. Someone posted like, oh, if you want to have a healthy snack and say goodbye to $12, try almonds. And I'm like, yeah, that's everything in
yeah.
LA, New York. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little, I mean, it's such a cliche, but I feel like in general, a lot of people, and especially a lot of working artists, have reevaluated what we're spending on and how we spend our time while we've spent more time at home. And it makes me think about my time's really valuable. So if I'm going to do work, it has to mean something in addition to giving me money, because this is time away from my work.
Yeah.
Away from my life's work.
What has being home, all day for a year and a half, what has that done to your creative process? Or has it changed at all as far as like songwriting or, doing visual art, anything?
It's changed a lot. In the beginning, I don't want to talk too much about the pandemic, but in the beginning, I started sewing again because I had to, because I couldn't even find like face masks. Like, everybody went crazy and everything was gone. So I actually ended up making accessories again because of it and designing again. So mentally, that really helped me realize like, oh, this is still something I love and enjoy, even though I'm kind of brought back into it for not the best reason. And then that trickled down to just different visual things. from working on a book to writing more to definitely writing more songs, focusing more on my instruments, because I feel like when you're in go-go mode, I don't even sit down as much in the normal world before the pandemic and like, oh, maybe I'll switch out my pedals this week and try a new sound. Like now I'm literally looking at every piece of gear, letting things go. Like that's been really good. It makes me realize also like it's the most time I've ever spent in the house probably since high school. Mm-hmm. So then you start thinking, do I really need all this stuff? What can go? Like we've literally been having garage sales to get rid of things. So
no.
yeah, it's been pretty interesting of like, yeah, I don't really need that. Yeah, I don't want to look at that every day. No, that can go. Like because everyone has like these weird, maybe not everyone, but the hoarders that I know in my life have, you have the boxes of like, oh, I'll get to that later. Oh yeah, I want to keep that, but I don't know what I'm doing with it. Like we're literally going through all of our stuff. So that's been really uplifting and energizing mentally, just to know like you don't have this foreboding, oh, did I forget something? Or what is that? Or like once a year, like, what is this thing? Why do I still have it? Reading more has been really good. I always buy a lot of books. And I'm always kind of reading 2 or 3 books at once. And it takes me forever to finish a book because I'm just enjoying them. Yeah. But whenever I go on a trip anywhere, I usually buy books. So I have many books that I'm just now getting to. So that's been really cool. Just quality of life, like start off. When I moved in with my partner also during the pandemic. And he's also a musician. And, typical New York story, like roommates left. Lease was up.
Okay.
And I only lived 5 blocks away. I was like, do I really want to keep running 5 blocks? Like, this is hectic. Why don't I just move? Yeah. And he's like, why don't you just move in early? So between our studios, we cut a window so we can use my studio for sound. But like we had a whole routine where we get up in the morning, read, we journal and have coffee and start our day. And that's been really great. And it's going to be hard to let go of that. Like some days I just look and think like, I'm going to be so sad when you go back to your regular job because I'm just used to like this time. Yeah. So, well, that's probably the main thing. What happened?
That's like the only romance pandemic success story I've heard.
I mean, not to say we don't get on. We definitely, everyone gets on each other's nerves, I'm sure. Yeah. Plus, I'm really someone who can spend days indoors and it doesn't bother me. And he's not. He'll be like, let's go out. Let's go for a walk. And I'll be like, do you have to? Like, I'm just enjoying being indoors. So, yeah, but yeah, we're very fortunate that way. It was very stressful though, like to suddenly move in the middle of everything, and I didn't really have time to pack properly, so that was also stressful. I'm still unpacking, and I've been here a year, so it's because life didn't stop because of the pandemic. I was still working on music. I was still booking stuff. I was still making things. There was never a, oh, I don't know what to do with myself moment at all. In the beginning, I was living with my really good friend who is a photographer, and we would get up every day and be like, I know the whole world is freaking out right now, but I'm just like, wow, I get to focus on stuff in here and I don't have to be anywhere. This is great. Like, aside from, the death and tragedy, of course, like being able to stay home was such a luxury. Mm-hmm. I'm still not over it. Every day that I wake up and I don't have to run and get on a train, I'm just like smiling. Yeah. So that's been it in a nutshell. But yeah, I don't have, maybe because my work was so sporadic before, I don't feel the work anxiety the way a lot of people do. Like I wasn't working a 40-hour a week job. Yeah. Those hours went to music, and then I was working maybe 15 hours a week here and there. So I don't feel like I'm not going to find employment, or yeah. If anything, I turned down a lot of work, especially pre-vaccine, because I just didn't feel safe working with the public. So I feel like those things will come back once things are calm.
I know. I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like it'll happen in a hurry. Like mentally, I'm prepared to be home for a while. So
me too. I was like, I feel like around May, June, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go to shows again soon. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get ready to just hunker down for another year and accept it. But yeah, Well, I wanted to ask you about touring too, because
Yeah.
I've heard that it's number one, is touring something that you like to do? Like I said before, I know that that's selling merch and playing shows and touring is how a lot of musicians are able to make their money. But do you like it? What don't you like about it? Just what has been your experience as a touring musician?
Sure. I've never toured the States before. So
Just the UK?
I've only toured in Italy, pretty much mostly Europe. So,
Oh my God.
like, if you talk about a full on tour that's more than 2 or 3 dates, I've never toured the US because the closest I came to that was with Apollo Heights. We did San Francisco, LA, and Portland.
Okay.
That was it. So, but we also did in Europe, we had a residency in Paris where we kind of lived there for 6 weeks basically. And then we played there, the UK, and Italy.
Oh, wow.
And we just would go out like on weekends and do dates.
Yeah.
It was all DIY and the transportation was a little hectic, but I loved it. With me, the biggest tour I did solo, I did a dual tour with my friend Noah, she's a Black German electronic artist, also from the punk scene. And we started, this is the hippie side of me. We were booking the dates and she was mostly booking Germany because that's where she's from. And also she was linking up a lot of our shows with a book tour, which was super genius. And then I added London, and I also wanted to go to Manchester because that's where my label is. So I had 2 dates in Manchester and then maybe a couple of dates in France. But for some random reason, in the middle of us booking, I had a dream that the tour started in Belgium. So I was like, we should play Brussels first. And we did. So, and I had friends there who helped us book a gig and we stayed at their house. And then from Brussels, we went to Germany. And that's the longest I ever went out as a solo artist and also stayed out of the country alone. I was gone for 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And I bought a Euro pass. I also I had like a bus pass because I take the bus a lot in the UK. Although now that I know about the Channel train, I will never do that again. And I loved it. Even though the travel part is kind of tedious, I still really loved it. I did a lot of writing. I got to see my friends. I got to really feel like I was living wherever I was.
Yeah.
And all I had to do every day was focus on music, even though I didn't have a lot of money because it was very bare bones. It was really thrilling to find things to do.
Yeah.
In another case, I've also had like 2 posh touring experiences. Like with the Slits, we had a tour manager.
Right. We
had a sound guy and we had like a tech roadie. And they also drove. So we just literally had to get in the van. Yeah. And like, I was telling someone the other day, like one day the tech guy came to me and said, I was hooking up your pedals and I noticed that you don't have a board. So he made me a pedal board for the tour. So literally, I didn't even carry my guitar to the stage. Every day of that tour, I wanted to cry tears of joy because everything was handled. Yeah. So there's that level of touring. And then I was in a band in Italy for a while, this electronic band, and I was only singing, so I didn't have any gear. So also we had a tour manager. Sometimes they came with us, sometimes not, but everything was handled. We had a van. Like, again, all I had to do was like be awake enough to get in the van. And so I learned Italian because our radio was broken in the van for the first tour. So we had no music and the drummer wanted to improve his English. So we became friends because we gave each other lessons.
Yeah.
And in that touring situation, also, and for some reason in Italy, your sound check is like 3 hours long. So after you load in, I was the queen of packing the van. So I could pack the equipment and make everything fit. And I was also good at merch. But after that, my work was done until my time to sound check because they would check each drum. So I had an hour every day minimal just to do vocal scales. That was amazing. It was incredible. I was like, okay, I'm professional now. I'm doing scales for an hour. I'm relaxed. I'm doing my sound check. We're having dinner. Like, that was a very, in my mind, even though it wasn't super posh as an artist, that was a wonderful way to tour. And I loved it. But of course, I wasn't driving, so I would have probably been more tired. Um, Touring the US kind of scares me because of logistics.
Mhm.
One, it's expensive. Two, most venues don't give the same kind of guarantees that you get overseas.
Mhm.
Three, when I've reached out to try to even book solo shows in other cities, no one cares that you're from New York. No one cares about your records. They just care that you have a local following. And it's like, well, how can you get a local following if you've never been there before?
Yeah.
And then I didn't know local bands to ask to play. So then it was just like, on your own, it's so hard to do. It's easier to meet those local bands now, thanks to social media. So that's kind of what's starting to bubble up.
Yeah.
But it still never seemed enticing enough for me to take that financial risk.
Yeah.
So that's why I've never toured the States. And on top of it, I don't drive or own a vehicle. So it's a lot of logistics for not the biggest reward.
Yeah.
But I have friends who do it, like for me, like alone, like maybe I could see like with some planning and really like being strategic about who we go with, maybe one of my bands would tour a little bit, but it doesn't make sense financially.
Yeah.
It would be more of like a working vacation if we did it, which is fine because that's honestly my attitude toward when I go overseas. It's like it's a working vacation. I see my friends, I make some money the days that I gig, and otherwise I'm getting in the studio with as many people as I can and just creating.
Yep. That's the way to do it. I mean, I've only ever traveled like when it's a work thing, really.
Yeah.
So I'm like doing interviews and then also seeing a new place. I feel like I'm accomplishing something and it makes it worth it for like spending the money. So I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
So
you're getting something out of it.
It's not like
then,
for myself.
Right. I mean, I think it's important to definitely try to get out of New York to play. I've done probably the most shows in California just from living out there.
Yeah.
But not in a long time.
Yep.
So
maybe soon. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, before the pandemic, the 1865 was supposed to play the Aftershock Fest. Like we were going to open for Metallica on opening night. Yeah.
Oh shit.
So imagine how crushed we were.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean
we're like, oh, maybe it'll still happen. Oh, maybe it's happened again. Like, yeah, I mean, it's that was going to be probably the biggest show we've ever done, definitely, because it's much bigger than Afropunk is, and we played Afropunk twice. So,
okay, well, maybe it'll be rescheduled.
We'll see.
Maybe. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you because I was originally an 1865 fan. So how did you start? How and when did you start that band? Because I also discovered you guys like pretty late too. I want to say maybe like a couple years ago.
We only started in 2017.
Oh, great! All right, so I wasn't because I'm like
we started in the summer of 2017, and then the record came out the following March, I believe. March 2018 is when the record dropped. So for a few months,
I knew what was up.
Yeah, totally.
It was an accident, but I found it. Okay.
But yeah, Sasha had been jamming with Chuck Treese, the drummer, for a while that year, like for a few months. And I think Sasha originally thought that Chuck would be the singer because, Chuck also plays every instrument. He's like Prince. But Chuck didn't want to sing. And Sasha had written some lyrics, but he felt like, well, let's add someone else to the band. And he reached out to Shannon from Run the Jewels, who's our mutual friend. And Shannon reached out to me. And I got on the phone with Sasha and he kind of explained, he's like, hey, I have this concept for a band. I've been working with Chuck, you know him. I was like, yeah, I've met him before, but I don't really know him.
Yeah.
And he told me, like what the concept was. He's like, we want to do, I think this was right. This is like Trump is already in office, but it's still pretty early in his career, but things are starting to turn south very rapidly. And he's like, there are all these lo-fi indie rock bands like Black Keys and the White Stripes. So where's the Black version?
Yeah.
Like we're doing some lo-fi blues punk stuff and with a message, are you down? And I'm like, yeah, send me the tracks. I'm down. I'm sold. And I'd already kind of done some music with Sasha like a few years before. We'd gone to the studio once and jammed and I recorded it. And then we were just both so busy, we never followed up, but we'd always run into each other. And I took it as an omen because I ran into him at the Bad Brains Secret show at OK Player Space when Daryl Jennifer had some paintings up and then all the old members came up and performed. And I'm like, every time I go to a Bad Brains show, whoever I see at that show, we end up being in a band. Like, it's hilarious. So literally, I'm like, when Sasha called, I was like, oh, of course, it's about to happen now. So we got together, we started jamming. I started writing lyrics right away and it clicked. And then our first show was 6 weeks later at that Afropunk. After that, we wrote some more songs and went to the studio like in a month. And we went to the studio maybe 3 times and finished the record. Like it happened really quickly. And during that time, I also ended up illustrating, like I illustrated the coloring book. So that was pretty exciting for me too, because I felt like, oh, this is like my life in full circle.
Yeah.
I'm writing political music and I'm drawing again. Like, whoa, where did this come from? So it was also doubly symbolic for me because I had, right before that happened, I had hand surgery. And I was like, am I gonna, like whenever something happens, I don't know, as we get older, you think like, oh, I really wish I would have cycled more before I had that accident or whatever. Like, oh, am I going to be able to play guitar? I'm not playing enough. It made me realize like, oh, I really have to be careful with my hands. So I had hand surgery. 2 weeks later, I was playing bass again. A month later, I get the call from Sasha. So I was like, okay, obviously I have to start playing music again, like actively, because my other band had also been on hiatus for like 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of made me realize like, yeah, I'm back on my path. Yeah. And then from then we just, the chemistry is pretty amazing as far as like the vision of what we're trying to say. And I always feel like when you work with people, one of my friends advised me, she's like, whenever someone invites you to work with them, you always, it's like when you're a graphic artist, like, oh, here are 6 designs, or when someone gives you tracks to work with, you always give them options, but the option that you like the best is usually the one they choose because it's the most you. So you can water it down and try to make it what you think it's going to be, but they always pick the one, in my experience, that you really love because you put the most into it. So when I started writing the lyrics for the 1865, one, I went back to the library. I was like, you know what? I want these songs to have authentic voice. Let me brush up on my history a little bit. Let me make these characters real. And then 2, I just really went as heavy as I could. And then at the end of every email, I'd be like, is it too much? And then Sasha's like, no, keep going. So I'm like, okay, that's it. Yeah. So once we like established what that language was, it was great.
That's awesome. I love that. I just love that band. So important. I feel like I know there's definitely stuff that I missed. Is there anything like enormous that I missed, or something that I didn't mention that you really want to talk about or include in this interview before I do the
I think the thing that I gathered from just kind of listening to the other women you spoke with tell their stories, the reoccurring theme is different people, like when they ask you what you do, like, and you say, oh, I play music. 1, they always assume you're a singer. 2, if you're Black, rock is the furthest thing from their mind. 3, so many times in my life, I can literally have like 2 backpacks of equipment on, and there's always going to be someone who will say, do you know how to play that? Like questioning, like, why are you carrying a guitar? Can you even play? Like that happens still. And it's sometimes it happens from other women.
Hmm.
So then you're just like, oh wow, this narrative is so ingrained in us that you can't even look at another woman and think they can do something that you've been told you can't do. So there's this pushback of like breaking the mold of what women are expected to be.
Hmm.
And then to be Black on top of it is just like it's changing now a little bit, but it's still there. Definitely.
I think going off of that, I do want to ask you, one of my most like memorable interviews was with Gaylan Dorsey, the bass player. She's
Yes.
kind of like, you know who she is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, her interview was great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you watched it. So she had mentioned, and this is back in the 80s,
Yeah.
but that she was always pigeonholed as like a Black musician, and she always was really interested in playing rock music, and that she had to actually go to Europe to like record her solo album because they would not let her record a rock album on Warner Brothers in the United States because she was Black, and they wanted her to play Black music.
I believe it. I mean, both of my solo records are not on American labels. One's Italian and one's UK. So I couldn't find any labels to sign me. There's another label that I've done a ton of records with, as the guest of other artists, and they're also known for punk, and they wouldn't sign me.
Okay, so yeah,
I can be a guest, I can be a vocalist. They're not trying to give any Black women a solo record who's not playing specific genres.
Yeah. So just like I hadn't even considered until I talked to you that extended into like the underground, or not necessarily. I don't think it's surprising to hear that in the mainstream, or like the mainstream music industry, but that like exists outside of that. And I don't know. Yeah. I didn't think about that until I talked to you, and how like disappointing and frustrating that must be, like for you sometimes. But
yeah, it's a little crazy. It's like the one thing I noticed when I started working overseas, and it's the thing I brought back to my friends, I was like, the biggest difference is in the US, people are constantly saying, you can't do that. You can't have a band if you don't have XYZ. You can't play this. Oh, you're in the folk scene. You can't use effects. In Europe, I've never heard anyone say you can't. It's more like, oh, what are you going to do? Like they're waiting to be surprised.
Yeah.
Never, not once, in any situation outside of the US, do I feel like a booker or a promoter gave me rules about what I can do on stage. Not once. So I get it. It's hard to, it's such a tricky thing because you're also, and I think Gaylan Dorsey spoke about this a little bit, when you leave the US, even if it's not your intention, you're automatically an ambassador for Black culture, even if what's considered mainstream Black culture isn't your thing. So then you're also a little bit up against that, but not shut down. I'd like to say that it's lessening just based on what I see happening with some of the younger artists now, that people are beginning to become more open-minded. And the best shining example I can give is that band, The Muslims, getting signed to Epitaph. I'm in shock, but I'm also so excited because I can't think of a better band to be on that label. But it's pretty groundbreaking, and maybe it's a sign of things to come.
Yep. Who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
So I just have a few, I ask the same 3 questions at the end of every interview. How do you feel about your role in and contribution to rock music, or just music as a whole?
I think my role has been to demonstrate fearlessness because of all the no's, and to not let whatever I think I might lack stop me from making sound and being out there. And yeah, that's it. Just to show other women, other girls, other femme identified people that you can do it.
And what are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock history? So again, just thinking about like how rock music specifically is remembered and who the kind of like archetypes are. So your thoughts on the visibility of rock history, is there a gender discrepancy? Has it changed for better or worse? Is it not a problem anymore?
Hmm. It's hard for me to not reference things people said in some of the interviews.
Oh no,
like,
that's okay.
I think about like, I think it was Tanya Donnelly who was talking about how she had that meeting with her manager with some A&R people, and they were talking about how there's too many women on the radio. Like, when has that ever happened? Too many women for who? You know, when the whole Lilith Fair thing happened, and it was happening at the same time as Riot Grrrl and as Lollapalooza and as Warped Tour, like all these things were happening at the same time, and women in rock were becoming more visible. It was a novelty that even though the fans were there and the interest was there audience wise, unfortunately, labels, media, whomever got bored with it. And it's a strange time now. It's hard. I'm having a hard time gauging what people really like versus what's pushed as popular.
Yeah.
I think it gets harder again with things like YouTube, social media, whatever. You know, I constantly hear, because I work with younger people, and when someone's trying to do something, they'll say, well, so and so has XK likes. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything if their music doesn't resonate with you. Can you remember their songs? This is here today and gone tomorrow. So I feel like we're living in a strange time of, do you want to be famous or do you want to be remembered? And when memorable things happen, it's always so exciting and so thrilling to see. And it seems like it's starting to happen a little bit more. And it also feels like women are, so much happens behind the scenes that now people are starting to talk about the fact that there are women engineers and there are women producers. And maybe we see it more in film, like women directors are elevated more. But what I guess I'm witnessing, and maybe this is my generation, is my peers talking about those other women that have been doing things that maybe you don't know their name. I don't know. It is becoming, maybe it's because of the bands that I'm seeing now and like the younger bands, it feels like it's hard to say which generation I'm talking about also, because sometimes I just don't know how old people are.
Yeah,
but it feels like there's an audience ready to just accept how people present themselves, which is huge.
Yeah.
And accept with no apology. Like, you can be a woman playing rock now, and you don't have to come out with this 200-word disclaimer. Oh, there are girls and they rock, and they're like, all that's gone. It's a lot to cut through, but I also feel like maybe people are more accepting now, is what I'm trying to say. And they're less accepting of things that make them feel bad or make them feel like they're not enough. Like, being enough is a movement right now, just the same way body positivity is. So that's super exciting because that's trickling into how people present themselves as artists.
Yeah. All right. Just what are you most proud of personally and or professionally?
I'm most proud that I left home because I had to work really hard to do it. No one helped me. Um, Literally, even though I was an A student, like in society, it was literally against all odds to be able to have the curiosity to know there was something else out there for me. I'm quite proud. And even though my path took different turns than I planned for myself, I'm still proud of what I've done once upon like taking that leap. Um, Professionally, probably like the first time I saw my name on a record, I'm like, wow, this is real. I'm really doing this. I'm really living this dream. And I'm probably the most proud of the record with the 1865 just because of all the levels of involvement and the message and telling those stories and telling it's hard to talk about such a difficult time in history. And I feel like the slave story is really such a worn out narrative that people are tired of. So I'm pretty proud that we were able to humanize it.
Yeah.
And people can rock out.
Yeah.
Like every time I see a mosh pit starting to a song that I wrote, I'm just like, wow, we did it. We pulled it off. Yeah. But it's also, you can see the emotion in people's face because they really get it.
Mm-hmm. And it's just never something that I thought, you know, I'm like in a PhD history program now, you know, and it's just such a relief to hear like Black musicians singing about that stuff and letting so that like your audience can learn about it in a different way. It's not just like some old white guy standing at a podium like giving a lecture, you know.
Right.
Just oh yeah, it's just I really appreciate it, and it's just incredible. Okay, is there any like huge gaps, anything that I missed? I know it's probably missed a lot of stuff because it's a very long and exciting life, but any glaring omissions?
I'm trying to think. I guess the biggest another kind of, I don't want to say hurdle, but another moment when I started to take things seriously as far as like, okay, I'm a songwriter and I'm an artist, starting to work with other musicians, and maybe this is for in my experience, it's mostly been in electronic music, who don't want to fully credit what I contribute, because they look at, again, one, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place with this, but like when I was in Apollo Heights, I joined that band just to be a player because I was tired of having to be pretty and sing perfectly and be in that role. Like that was never comfortable for me. And I loved electronic music because I had a pile of gear to hide behind. So I could just focus on the music and it wasn't about me and what I was wearing and all those things. And that band was fun, you know, it was fashion, whatever, but they're like, oh, do you want to sing? I'm like, no, because every time a Black woman's on stage, we're just supposed to sing and be pretty, and that's it. And we don't write, we don't contribute, we don't get credited. They don't even bother to spell our name right most of the time. So this has happened to me in many projects. And at a certain point, it just makes me realize, like, this is just how women are viewed in the industry. Like, you're the backup singer, you come in, or you're going to do this session and I'm just going to sample it. So I'm still the composer and you're not. Like, there are all these ways to kind of push women down into this role where we get less respect.
Yeah.
And I really fight it. And I feel like because that exists and that it is something that it's a patriarchal condition that even women are conditioned to the point of not knowing to ask for more. When it happens in a collaborative setting, it's extremely awkward because the person trying to do it doesn't even understand because that's the way they've been conditioned. Yeah. And then when it happens in a rock band setting, like for instance, in my first band, I had to teach them the music, even though I don't read. So I had to figure out some kind of way to chart stuff out and give it to Monk, and then he had to teach it. But then you sing and they see you just singing without a guitar. So they assume the dudes wrote all the music.
Mhm.
So, not saying it happened in that band, but it happens. And it's one of those things we just have to fight against as women. Like when we step on stage, we have to really own it. And I go out of my way to be as empowered as I can when dealing with engineers, when dealing with sound people, with whoever I'm coming across the path with. So they understand I know what I'm doing and I deserve to be there. But sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes you just want to play and not have to worry about defending your right. Like I'm a musician just like them. It's I feel like a lot of women come up against that. I found it really interesting though. I think two people said this. The woman from the Dandy Warhols, I forgot her name.
Oh, Zia. Yeah.
And also maybe Gail Andor, she said, when you are in a group where it's all guys, like one defense mechanism is to be a guy, which I have all brothers, so that's like a natural thing for me. Like, oh, well, I'm just one of the dudes. Like, what are they doing? Okay, I'll do that too. So then that's like another way to kind of combat that energy.
Mhm.
But I felt like she brought up a really good point, and it made me realize I did this too. Like, it made me be a little bit anti-woman because I felt like, oh, there are these women encroaching upon my space. I'm one of the dudes. Why is she on stage? Why is she talking to me? Like, it really made my behavior very defensive. And I'm more soft now, but I definitely had a moment where I'm like, why are there girls backstage? Why this? Why that? Like, they're not in the band. I'm in the band. Like, it's a defense mechanism to protect the fact that you really are there and you want to be seen as separate from them.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you said that because when I started playing music too, I was always like the only girl in bands with guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did feel like that. I don't know if I would ever say it out loud, but I remember feeling that, and I didn't stop feeling that way probably until I was in my like mid-20s, and like just I think it goes along. There's that myth too that like Tanya Donnelly said, and a lot of women in the 90s said that there's not enough room for like more than one or two women at a time. So I think we also sort of like absorb that.
Yeah.
It's not even like an intentional thing, but it's just like, I need to claim my space. Like men don't feel like that because you're allowed to have a million guys on stage and you see like festival bills, and it's not like there's no male quota, but there's always like a quota for women. Yeah. So I think that's part of like why that feeling ever even existed, like in me anyway.
Yeah. I think for me, it was more like, and this is so horrible, and I'm cringing as I say this, but like, I would never go to a show and get on stage while someone's moving their equipment and start asking them questions, male or female.
Yeah.
And women would do it to me. And I'm like, okay, first of all, why are you on stage right now? Because you're not in the band. And then it's like, oh, and then I always felt kind of like a pawn. Like, oh, this girl's talking to me because she wants to talk to the guys in the band. So now if I talk to her, she gets to stay on stage. Like there were so many levels. And then with the backstage situation, backstage is tiny.
Mm-hmm.
In most situations, you're not in a luxurious, gigantic green room where each band has their own space. So then I'm like, I'm in the band and I need to rest. Why is this girl allowed to be in my chair? Like, then it becomes that girl and I'm not a girl. Like, it's this so separation of like, who thought this was a good idea? Yeah. So, and guys don't think about it because, they're in guy mode. Mm-hmm. So as I look back now, I realize like, maybe some of those situations I could have been nicer because who knows, maybe it was a woman who wanted to talk about pedals, but I was just irritated.
Yeah.
So
and I'm like, maybe she really just thought you were the coolest and wanted to talk to you and follow you.
Yeah, maybe. I was just like, don't talk to me. I'm just here to play guitar. I'm turning my back now. Like I was very like abrasive.
That's funny too, because I'd never had I didn't know that was like a gender thing, but I'll always, or when I would play more often, guys just like jump up before you're done and they're just like, oh, what kind of drum's that? Oh, what pedal is that? And I'm like,
right.
so, but I've never had like, it's always just weird guys who just,
Yeah.
like I would
Guys
never.
will ask about, in my experience, guys will be like, what are you playing? But
Yeah.
women would be like, oh, can I play your guitar? And
Oh, I see.
I was like, this is actually a real concert and I'm really in the band, so no.
Oh my God. That's
And then they would be upset that I said no.
yeah.
Like I'm bad. It was very strange.
That is very strange.
So then I just lost patience for anyone after that. I was like, don't talk to me.
Yeah. Well, you seem
like, talk to him. He's the singer. And then I'd just turn, like start doing stuff.
And then you're like, then you're the bitch though.
I was the surly one.
Oh, you were the surly.
I was very surly. I definitely like, they would, if you read any interviews, they're like, yeah, she has an attitude on stage. And they're like, but the girls love it. And I'm like, I'm not here to make, like, that's not my role.
Yeah.
But they loved it. They really played it up.
That's funny. Well, you're very lovely and nice to talk to, and you've got great stories.
Oh, thanks.
So I don't find you surly at all.
I've worked on myself.
Yeah.
I've worked out my anger through my music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, talking about the Sister Girls, the thing that because I'm still in touch with everyone, and sometimes Tamar, Colleen, and I, we get together and we go to our favorite little vegan diner and just reminisce about things. But the thing that she kind of brought up that I found really interesting and really important is when people look at like punk black or Afro punk or all these new scenes, they don't understand that we really were friends. It wasn't just that we made a scene to be cool. Like we all had real friendships and really spent time together outside of playing shows. And that's what made it very special for us. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't matter if we never do another riot, like we love each other as people. And that's something you can't package. You can't commercialize that kind of connection. And I think that's true in most small DIY scenes.
Yeah. I didn't ask you this because, I haven't read any like crazy, like stories about you, but I do, drugs and alcohol obviously come up a lot in different scenes throughout history. They come up a lot in interviews. And I remembered at the beginning of the interview, you said when you moved to New York, you were 19, but you didn't drink. And do you still not drink or do drugs, or was there a period like, I just always wonder what it's like to be sort of in the nightlife and like play music and be in that lifestyle, and sort of avoid the pitfalls that come with it a lot of the time.
Sure. And that's not easy to do because I was never a big drinker. I think that I was just so happy to be allowed to go places as an underage person that I wasn't trying to draw attention to myself. And also I didn't have money to buy drinks. So like, I was like a poor art student. I vividly remember like me and my friends only went to places that had open bar.
Yeah.
And, like it would be like an hour, you'd get a drink, whatever, you'd leave. So drinking wasn't the priority of going out, dancing was.
Okay.
As I got older, I would say like more so when I started playing shows and then you're given drinks and people are buying you drinks and then your friend's a bartender and blah, blah, blah. Like you start to drink a bit more. I do remember at one point when I was going to see Maya DJ a lot and I discovered tequila, I kind of made a decision that maybe I should not drink so much tequila. Like, once you go to work a couple of times and you haven't slept and feel really gross. Yeah. But I guess I don't like feeling hungover. It makes me like so depressed. And then 2, I don't like losing time.
Yeah.
Because time is so valuable, and waking up or just having to sleep a couple of days because you partied too hard it really makes me depressed. Yeah. Like every now and again, New Year's Eve, whatever, sure. But like as a weekly lifestyle, I remember like when I lived in the East Village, probably at the peak of a lot of like the kind of ravey things that were happening, I would go out a lot and be out all night and then like sleep all day Sunday and then work Monday. But it wasn't so much drinking, it was just more like staying out all night. Now I also remember like before when Apollo Heights knew we were going to go to France,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, you guys, we're going to France. We're going to be drinking a lot of wine. We should probably give our livers a break for like a few months. So for a few months, we didn't drink, but we had like some edible brownies or something, like eat a little piece of brownie and do a show, but no alcohol.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one show we played where it was during the time when we weren't drinking and maybe had no edibles, and everybody was really angry on stage. Like it was very tense. And we played super fast, and it was probably the best show we ever played because everyone was so hyper focused and sober.
Yeah.
And I was like, what was wrong with us that night? Why were we in such a bad mood? It's like, oh, because we didn't have any brownies. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, we can't roll like this. This is terrible. But yeah, I think because I was like a 70s kid and they showed us so many crazy like movies about, oh, this is what happens if you do heroin, or this kid did too much PCP. Like, I'm not going to say I never experimented with things, although thank goodness not heroin, but I never wanted to be any kind of addict, be it cigarettes, alcohol, anything. I never wanted to feel like I had to do something every day. So that was like always in the back of my mind. Now, because of the pandemic, I don't drink as much, so I have no tolerance. Like, I had 2 martinis last week and I was so ill. Like, literally, like, what happened? I have no tolerance left at all. So I'm just kind of like, it's more like just now I know how it makes me feel because I haven't really been drinking for a year. It's just like, I don't even want to. So
High on
the
what?
occasional glass of wine, but
Yeah.
It's not a daily thing. That daily, like, ooh, it's happy hour, that's gone.
Yeah.
That's been gone since I like quit commuting pretty much. So yeah, I've been in bands with people who are sober. I've been in bands with people who maybe they were sober in the beginning and relapsed.
Oh, okay.
I've unfortunately lost band members because they were just partying too hard and it became unbearable. And it's sad because it's like you can't tell somebody how to live their life, but it also is very destructive.
Yeah.
But I feel very fortunate because I've certainly been in situations where it could have been very easy to slip off that slope and keep going and be highly functioning and no one would know.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. So
my last just nosy question is, I've been trying to guess the whole time, but what's your sign?
Pisces.
I had no fucking idea. Okay. I don't have a gift or anything. I was just like, do you know your rising sign or anything?
I think Libra might be my rising
I'm so
sign.
confused because I'm like, what is this?
Yeah. I have a lot of things in Pisces and I have like something in Libra, something in Virgo, but most of my chart is Pisces.
Whoa. Yep. Wouldn't have guessed that.
That's where I get my weird pockets of OCD from, I'm sure. But,
okay.
like you're so meticulous here and everything else is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Virgo, Pisces, Libra.
Right.
All right. Well, I hear my dog is like burrowed under my bed.
Aww.
I don't know how he got over there. Okay. Well, I'm trying to think.
Do you talk about gear or it's more just like life stuff?
All right. You know what? I'm glad you said that because I had a gear question and I skipped over it. It was after songwriting because I like don't, all interviews are subjective, right? And I could like give a shit about gear but I'll just like play whatever.
Right.
You talked about the pedal board.
Yeah.
So I'm more nosy about like people, but I do. And I was just looking at your guitars behind you and like the Hagstrom. I love the one in the middle. So yeah, is gear important to you? Do you use different gear for different projects, like intentionally? I'm really glad you said that because I skip over the gear question like all the time.
Oh, sure. Yes. every project I use different gear for, based on the sound. Like for instance, the 1865, I play baritone guitar. So I actually had to learn that instrument once we started writing. And the baritone, the blue guitar behind me is a custom guitar I had made. The Hagstrom I've had the longest. I play that pretty much most every time I play solo. And then the hollow body to the right is actually my newest guitar. So I've never played it live, but it's similar to my first guitar, which was a hollow body harmony. And I wrote all my songs on that. So I got this hoping to get the same feeling. And then I have a couple of basses, and I play electric mountain dulcimer and also mandolin.
Okay, I didn't know about the dulcimer. And what about amps too? So I noticed you have like a Vox behind you, but do you?
Yeah, I started playing through Vox amps with Apollo Heights because that was our like shoegaze signature sound, and I went back to it recently. But now I'm starting to play through this orange head with a Marshall speaker, and I really like that combo a lot. So that's kind of my newest guitar sound. I haven't found my bass sound yet. I'm still playing around with some things. Nothing's really grabbing me.
Yeah. Well, when you find one, let me know, because neither have I.
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot of bass lately.
A lot of bass?
Yeah. Just for fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Bought a new one. Fun. Yeah, during the pandemic. And just trying to like be okay at it. So,
no, it's great.
Yeah.
It's especially for writing. I love it. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, because I usually like I'll write a bass line on the guitar or something. And so when I record, I'm like, why don't I just get a fucking bass and I can like do that myself first. Yeah. So it's been fun. And I like knowing how to play everything.
Yeah, no, it helps. It helps. Yeah, I have drums. I have the drums of the 1865 behind me, but we're getting rid of the piano, and then I'm gonna hook up the drum kit. So
cool.
Then I can just get loose. I'm not a drummer at all, but sometimes I like to pretend I can play.
Yeah, you could be a drummer.
Just for fun, for the release.
Yeah.
But yeah, I use the same pedals for bass that I use for guitar. Actually, the exact same effects. I like to make the bass sound like a spaceship. So there's a lot of rumble. There's a lot of psychedelic atmospherics happening.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. Man, see, all right, talking about gear isn't so bad. I just like
it's not bad at all.
Staring at your guitars the whole time. I think it's also a little bit of self-consciousness, you know, like because I don't know much about gear. And so like I don't want to, you know, it's that same thing of growing up and being like afraid to go into the music store, you know.
Totally.
And now I just go in and I'm not afraid to ask questions. And I'm just like,
that's great.
I don't know what I'm doing. This is what
the music store thing, it used to be so frustrating. Like I would always, like once a year I go in and I play the most expensive Gretsch guitar on the wall, just because I know it's in my goal. And getting people to take it off the wall is always really fun. They're getting better now, but in the beginning, like in 1993, they'd be like, that's the guitar you want to play? I'm like, yes, please bring that one down. And they'd be so hesitant. Now they'd be like, which guitar do you want? And they just hand it to you and walk away like it's no big deal. You're like, whoa.
No, it really has changed. Like I go, because I've been primarily playing drums for a couple years. So the music store I go to here never had a problem. It's also like a pretty, like liberal area. No one has ever said a word to me. They don't ask if I like know what I'm looking for. They're just like, oh, need some drums? Oh, need a drum head? Sure, here they are. It's like first time in my life, and I'm like 40 years old now, but it's great. So
yeah, it's definitely changing. It's funny because I don't know if you ever go to Guitar Center, but even though I have, so they always mail those cheesy catalogs out. And I'm like, please don't mail it to me. I come to the store, I go to the website, and it's always like some dudes on the cover. And now they're starting to put women on the cover with like a guitar. And I'm like, oh, you're trying to sell to me now. Okay.
That's hilarious. I wish I still got them now. Yeah. I didn't last through the change.
Yeah, it's nuts. But but with gear, it's like one of my friends, actually my friend Monk, in the beginning, because in the beginning I didn't really understand pedals at all. And he was like, whatever you have, just make sure that all of your gear works, because like he kind of gave me this boost, like bring your own power strip, do this, do this. He's like, because as soon as you get on stage, you know, I hate to say this, but you have to prove yourself. So just make sure everything's in order. That way, when you talk about what you need, you command the respect. So that's kind of something I always try to tell like younger musicians too, like, oh, make sure you have everything you need. So like you feel confident about what you're saying, even if it's your first time using the pedal, they don't need to know that. Just make sure you have your pedal, you know, you have your cables, bring everything so that you're not leaning on them for something so basic that you should know, because you're owning it. And it kind of helped me feel confident about asking for stuff too in person, because like, you know, now during the pandemic, I mean, I went to a music store for the first time a month ago in a year. And I'm like, I can't order pedals online. I need to go hear what this sounds like. I'm not going to trust the guy in the text chat box to tell me, like, I need to know. So just to be able to have that confidence to walk in and be like, you know what, I want to try these pedals and I want to try that amp, and can you hand me this, and not even flinch.
Yep.
It's great.
I know. I think like age has a lot to do with that for me too. Anyway, I'm just like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to say something to me, I'll just tell you to fuck off, or just be like, you know, seriously, like a little gentle shaming.
Right.
You know, yeah. So I do love being older now too. I'm just like, I wish that I felt like this when I was in my 20s.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Then also too, like in my case, like I was going to like a really intimidated music store, and you're like, oh, the guys here are so cool, and I don't want to seem like I'm not cool, so I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm just going to walk through, you know, like you just feel so intimidated by all of it. But now it's like a candy store, unfortunately. So
I know it's expensive.
Go in and try.
All right. Anything else that you want? You brought up really great topics that I skipped over. Anything else before we end? Because you got good ideas.
I can't think of anything else. Nothing comes to mind.
No, I mean, I think we covered quite a bit.
I mean, we covered politics. We covered the politics thing is really interesting too, because pretty much every group I'm in, all the music's political. I realized when I wrote it all out, I'm like, oh wait, Heavens Be also political.
Mm-hmm.
God also political. Finding ways to creatively share a message is probably the biggest challenge. I can think of a lot of political punk bands where you're like, oh, they're so righteous, but their music bores me.
Yeah.
Or maybe the sound quality isn't great, or there's something, just as a fan, something's missing. You know, if you think about ethics on point, but entertainment wise, it falls short. So I try to think of ways to not leave the fan. Like I want people to, I mean, Sasha says this a lot, but like at the end of the day, you want the music to stand on its own. And then if the message gets through, awesome. But I don't want the message to dominate the music.
Yeah, perfect.
I got nothing else.
That concludes this episode of the Women of Rock Oral History Project podcast, Season 2, Episode 7, with Honeychild Coleman. Please follow Women of Rock Oral History Project on Instagram and Twitter at Women of Rock OHP. You can also follow us, friend us, whatever it is, on Facebook. This is a publicly funded and sustained project, and donations are always welcome. You can donate through the website, on Facebook. You can email me, whatever you prefer, PayPal. It helps keep the project going, and I appreciate it. If you don't have any money to spend or share, please just share the project itself. Use the interviews. Write about these artists. You know, sing it loud, and I will see you next time.